Good evening. This coming Shabbos is Parshas Vayeshev, and I want to bring us into the realm of the Shivtei Koh. We're speaking about Tzadikim Gemurim. These were such righteous Tzadikim that the Zohar asks the question that if they sold their brother and they were obligated, in other words, they had the death penalty having over them, why didn't simply after the story, weren't they somehow, somewhere killed? But they had to wait till the Asara Haruge Malchus, and I mentioned this to you around 10 months ago, that the Zohar HaKadosh says there was no Malach, there was no Saraf, there's different levels of angels. And we have Malachim, we have Serafim, we have Ofane HaKodesh, we have Chayos HaKodesh. There was no level of angel that was able to effectuate a punishment into these Shivtei Koh. And if that's the case, and they were killed as Hasora Ruge Malchus some 1600 years later as Tanoim, so how do we understand this business of jealousy? Because the theme of the very beginning of the Sedra is Vayikanu vo Echov, that the brothers were jealous of Yosef. We know that Yaakov Avinu prepared a colorful cloak for him. And as Meforshim say, that if you take the words Kesones Pasim, it's referring to different Mesechtes and Shas, and a siyum of each one of those categories was the essence of the Shvatim. And Yosef, who was beloved, and the Gemara says that from this story we learn out that a father should not favor one child over another in a father or mother relationship with the children. Because look what happened over here. And they were so big, and to be punished, they had to wait 1600 years later. So how do we understand what was going on with these tremendous tzaddikim, that even a Chayos HaKodesh could not come near them and touch them? So I want to go through the Sedra with that question in mind. And when they finally sold him, and as a matter of fact, the Meforshim, the Medrash says that Yaakov Avinu escorted Yosef when he went out to go look for his brothers, escorted him. And the Rambam on this says that of all the mitzvahs, to bury the dead, to take care of a kala, for all of these things, there is nothing on the list that is greater than escorting the levoya, that when we escort somebody after they're a guest in our home, and the feeding and the drinking and giving them where to sleep, and all of these mitzvahs do not rise to the level of escorting. And the Meforshim, the Talmidim of the Rambam, explained why he said that that was the most important specific mitzvah above and beyond anything else, because everything else you are making the guest feel comfortable and happy. You're giving them delicious food, you're speaking with them, You're giving to the person that passed on great honor. They see everything going on at a levaya, as the Zohar HaKadosh says in Parshas Kisavo, that the nefesh remains at the cemetery and like hovers around the body before it is buried. It's the ruach and the neshama and the chaya and the yechida that return perfected. All the averos that a person could do in their lifetime never touches the ruach, neshama, or the chaya or yechida. It's the nefesh that Nebuch suffers, and that's why the pasuk says v'nichrisa hanefesh hahi. It doesn't ever say v'nichrisa haneshama, because the suffering done when we do an avera, that remains like with us, and we have to deal with it. We have to pay back for the disregard of not doing something or the regard to do something, and we missed it. So the brothers had a cheshbon that, as the Meforshim say, they sat down as a bezdin, and they paskened that he was a roidev, that Yosef, their brother, was out to destroy them. And they believed it. They sat down at a bezdin, and they were able to paskin that they had a din of roidif, he had a din of roidif, and they were allowed to kill him. And they threw him into the bore, and then they took him out and they sold him. And it says that when they sold him, that the caravan of the Yishmaelim, he was about to be taken down to Mitzrayim, and he was going to be in Potiphar's house and rise to Gedula and then be thrown into a jail for 12 years. So it wasn't an easy journey, what he was in for, yet the pasuk says, and Rashi discusses it, that the caravan that took him down had in it a fragrance, because usually Yishmaelim, for the last 3,000 years, they're busy selling oil, which has a very negative odor. And Rashi brings the Chazal that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had an exact cheshbon of how much suffering or not suffering, that basically he wanted the trip for Yosef to be with fragrance, good smelling. So there was besomim, there was cologne, there were perfume, whatever it was, in that caravan, so that he would be breathing fragrance and not something negative in its smell. Now, why would we even care? I mean, someone's on his way for 12 years of tsaris, and he was 17 at the time, and when he got out and stood before Paro to become the viceroy of Egypt, he was 30. So there was 13 years that he suffered. So who really cares if for the day or two he had a pleasant smelling caravan, or it wasn't so pleasant? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu is medactic, as the Medrash says, kechut hasara. And that aspect of his trip had to be pleasant. That wasn't part of the decree on him of what had to happen. But It's these little things that make the whole difference in a person's perspective. We know that the Gemara in Bracha says that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that the day that he was about to be nifter, to die, his Talmidim came to visit him and they found him crying. So they said to him, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the greatest of the great. I mean, there was nothing bigger. Why are you crying? Are you worried about dying? Waiting for you in Shemayim is the whole Patish HaChozak and all of the descriptions that they said to him at the time of his greatness and his glory, what he did for Klal Yisrael. You're crying, what are you worried about? So the Gemara says that he answered them and said that if I was going for judgment in front of a human, that he only could kill me and it lasts 2 minutes, and then I have Olam Haba, I would be afraid of that human judgment. So when I'm going before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shouldn't I be severely feared and full of worry? What's going to be? So why was he worried? And why did he cry? Now we know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived at the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And the Tsar, or whatever his title was in Rome, said that I will grant a wish to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And whatever he asks for, I'm going to do. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Gemara says, he asked for 3 things. He asked for Yavne v'Chachameha. There was a city that was jam-packed with Talmidei Chachamim, and it was called Yavne. And he asked that they be spared so that there be the lineage of Torah to exist by Yidden. The second thing, he asked for 3 things, not just one. That Rabbi Gamliel, who was in the chain, the lineage of Nesiim by Klal Yisrael, that majestic, it wasn't kings, but it was that in the time of the Gemara, it was called a Nasi b'Yisrael, that he be spared and that they made sure he would live so that that lineage and that genealogy remained by Klal Yisrael. And the third thing that he asked for was Reb Tzaddik. There was a very, very heightened tzaddik, pure spiritual, that was sick and he needed some medicine. And he asked that they bring that medicine to him. And the Tsar granted all 3. So the Meforshim jump and ask a question. If the Tsar was willing to do something, why didn't he just ask that the Beis HaMikdash continue standing? So there's an opinion in the Gemara that he was so fearful to ask for a larger item that he maybe wouldn't get anything. They would turn him down on everything. And the Mefarshim are struggling with why he didn't ask for the Beis HaMikdash. And the Gemara even ends up and said he made a mistake. He could have asked and he would have been granted it, but he didn't ask. So the Mefarshim explain that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was worried about one thing, You know, there was a group of youthful Turks called Bar Yoinim in the Gemara, and they held that we should not submit, we should fight Rome. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, no, we have to work this out peacefully. So the Bar Yoinim, the Gemara says, these young Turks went to the silos and to the warehouses of all the wheat, and the Gemara says there was enough wheat in those storage houses to feed the whole Klal Yisrael for 21 years. And they went and they burnt it down to the ground to force Klal Yisrael to have to fight the Romans and not deal with them peacefully. So the Gemara says that there was a chashash in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's mind that when the Beis HaMikdash was being destroyed, that there was a human 1% in him feeling, you see, youngsters, what you wanted to do, and at the end it's being destroyed. You lost the whole battle. So you see, I was right. And that's why he cried. Maybe there was a machshava of nitzachon, of victory, that he proved to be right, that this was not the way to handle the situation. And that's what the Meforshim compare this story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai to the Shivtei Koh. Because the Shivtei Koh is big, big, big giants, tzaddikim gemurim they were. But it says, Vayikanu vo'echav, that it seeped into the metzias of their minds that they hated Yosef and that he deserved to die. And it really answers for us another question that we have in this parsha. It says that Reuven was not there when they sold their father. And that's why his neshama, at the time when the Asar Arugei Malchus happened, his neshama went into Reb Elazar Reb Hyrcanus, and the Romans never touched him. He was walking the street. The others had to hide in caves and underground and everything, but they were all caught and they were killed. But Reb Elazar Reb Hyrcanus did not. Why? Because his neshama was from Reuven. And Reuven was not there by the Mechira. He went back to his father's house. Rashi brings two things this week, Sedra, why he went back. He went back, either it was his day to service his father and to take care of him, or he went back to do tshuva and put on the sackcloth and to be able to do tshuva that he changed the bed when Rachel passed away. So Reuven said, the bed of my father should now be in my mother's tent, not in one of the maidservants' tent, and he changed the beds. So he realized that maybe he made a mistake. So the Meforshim ask, why now? When the story of Reuven changing the beds of his father to the tent of his mother, Yosef was 9 years old. Now, as the pasuk says at the beginning of our Sedra, Sheva Esrei Shana, he was 17. So this was 8 years earlier, and Reuven suddenly woke up and said, you know something, I think I have to do tshuva. Why did 8 years pass? What happened suddenly that now he thought he had to do tshuva? So they answer, because when he saw that the brothers made a bezdin to kill Yosef, he started thinking, wait a second, they have jealousy. There's jealousy. That means negias, they can't be impartial. They have some reason to be slanted in their view and in their plan and in their psak halacha. And that's why Reuven said, let's throw him into the pit. But and the pasuk says that Reuven's whole intention was only to come back after his day and pull him out of the pit, lahashivo el oviv, to bring him back home to his father. And why was he doing this? If a bezin, all the brothers paskined, so there was a psak halacha that he should die. So why was he going to take him back to the father and wanted to save him? Because it started seeping into his mind that there was such jealousy. How could they have paskined with a clear mind, pure 100%, in their intention and in their willingness to do the right thing, when they are absolutely steered away in their thought process because of the jealousy? And Reuven at that moment said, wait a second, if my brothers who have such tzidkus and such pure intention be motivated to do what they're doing because of jealousy, then maybe 8 years ago when I changed those beds, I meant it for my mother's honor. But it wasn't with my father's permission. So my love for my mother steered me off the route of what was 100% proper and not 100% proper. And that's why he started doing tshuva just then. Now, this concept of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and the Shivtei Koh, that something presents itself that could deflate that which stood before us with such surety, that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Zakkai was worried, maybe I'm going to come up and the first thing they're going to ask me, why didn't you save the Bais Hamikdash? And that's why he cried. And the Shivtei Koh, when Yosef in 2 Sedras says, Ani Yosef, when you sold me, you didn't think that I'd be standing here as the viceroy of Egypt. And it says, V'lo yachlu la'anos oso ki nivhalu. They were devastated. They were so embarrassed that they couldn't bring themselves to say anything. V'lo yachlu la'anos. They couldn't answer him. They were overwhelmed because it hit them that they had steered off the road of pure 100%, even though it was 99%. But that 1% was missing, and that's why they were guilty. Ashemim anachnu, asher ra'inu achinu b'tzoras nafsho b'hischanano eleinu v'lo shamanu. Our brother begged us mercy. Don't throw me in. Don't kill me. Don't do this to me. V'lo shamanu, but we did not listen. Al kain bo'o eleinu hatzara hazos. That's why we're in trouble now, because of the misthinking. And I would cite to you a medrash that everyone talks about it, the Gemara, the medrash, that when Aaron was, the pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu said, how are you asking me to go take Klal Yisrael out? I have an older brother. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, don't worry, Aaron will be thrilled for you, and he's going to come out. V'ro'acha, he's going to see you coming to take Klal Yisrael out. V'samach b'libo. So the Medrash says that Aaron said later that if I would have known that in the Torah it would say v'ro'acha v'samach b'libo, that I will end up being happy, I would have met him with a brass band. Besupim uvimcholos. I would have gone out not just smiling and happy, but I would have brought out who knows what. And in addition, by Rus, we find that Vayitz Balkany Vatochal, that he gave an order. Don't forget that Boaz was 400 years that day. And he married Rus after he made the drasha, Amonim velo Amonis. Moavim velo Moavis. So he had a heter to marry her. He lived with her one night. She became pregnant. She was expecting. And Melech HaMashiach, David HaMelech, came out from that one night union. And the next day, Boaz died. But the Medrash says that Boaz said, oh, that's what they're going to write about. I was a little bit hesitant because they were going to say a 400-year-old man is with a young girl giving her to eat. So I was like I gave her to eat and I wanted her to eat. But the Medrash says that Boaz said that if I would have known that that's what would have been written, I would have brought out complete, tasty, fat cows and agolim and calves and all sorts of delicacies. So the question really is, what Aaron and Boaz, were they publicity seekers? Oh, now that the Torah wrote such a complimentary thing about me, such a nice thing, I would have gone all out. But each one of them had a question in their mind, just like the Shiv Teikoh, that each one, Aaron was afraid of putting down his brother. So he was subdued. He was worried that maybe it wouldn't come out properly. And Boaz thought that maybe there's going to be terrible gossip, that I'm an older man and this is a young girl. What is he busy worrying about her food? And that's the reason that they had hesitancy and that they made these statements, because they felt utilize the opportunity, like many of us who unfortunately are given every day of our lives such golden opportunity to achieve and to do. And we don't seize it. And we come up with Yetzer Hara things, this reason, that reason. We're always hesitant to fully exercise the power and talent that we possess to bring out the richness of that specific thing in and of itself. Now, we know that Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Levracha, Zechuso Yogein Oleinu Hashem Yimka Damo, that he was here in America when the Holocaust was going on, and he said, I have to go back to my flock, to my city. And they said to him, Rebbe, you're going back to your death. You're going to be killed. He said, yes, I know that. But he paskined that he had to go back with them and sang with them Ani Mamin as they were being shot and murdered in cold blood. So he asked a question. Why is it that it was so effective what the Goyim said about a blood libel? I mean, we have suffered for over 1,000 years, maybe 1,500 years from this blood libel nonsense. The thing that Yidden run most from is blood. In other words, when we have a piece of meat, we soak it, we wash it, we do so many things to make sure that every drop of blood is taken out. So to say in the libel that we take the blood of a non-Jewish child and we bake our matzahs with it. And don't think that this was just something 1,000 years ago. This blood libel killed hundreds. Upstate New York in 1928. This blood libel. There was a massive pogrom then, upstate New York, in a very goyish city, but there was like 100 or 200 Yidden between the women, children, everyone, and there was massive killing because of the blood libel. How could it even make sense for a goy to think that's how they should accuse the Jews? So Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman answered and said, because of our parsha, that when the Shivtei Kod took the ksonis of Yosef and they dipped it in the blood to fool their father, we are paying for it to this day with the blood libel because of what they did at that point and the suffering that we had because of how we were treated. Now, the pasuk says, by Yosef, you all remember that he came down to the house of Potiphar, and in the house was living Osnas, the daughter that was produced by Shechem and Dinah. And they were living, she was there, and at the end she ended up marrying, Yosef married her and had Menashe and Ephraim. But there was trouble. And what was the trouble? Yosef, as the Gemara, as the Medrash and the Gemara says, was exceedingly handsome. So handsome that when his chariot as the viceroy in Mitzrayim used to go down the street, the girls lined up on the walls just to take a peek at him. So Mrs. Potiphar wanted to have an affair with him. And Yosef, as we know from the Parsha, refused to do anything. And Rashi says that Lishkav Etzlo Leos Ima, that she said to him, listen, either you're going to be intimate with me here in Olam Hazeh, because she saw that some from her house is going to come out from her house, from Yosef, children, and she thought it was her. And that's why she said, listen, if you don't want to live with me and be intimate here in Olam Hazen, this world, no problem. Then just promise me you're going to be with me in Olam Haba after all of us die. Now, for a woman that wanted to do an Aveira, and she was married to Mr. Potiphar, you would think that she was a Marshas. Rashi says that she was Maskim. I won't say another word. Just be Maskim to be with me in Olam Haba. And from her came out Mashiach ben Yosef, meaning from Osnas, who was in her house like a daughter. And from the next parsha that we're going to talk about in just a moment, Tamar and Yehuda came out Mashiach ben David. And that's the reason that these two parshas are put back to back. Juxtaposition of these two stories are in the Torah, one right back to the other. One produced Mashiach ben Yosef and one Mashiach ben David. The main one, of course, is Mashiach ben David that we're waiting for and hope will come very soon. Mashiach ben Yosef already came. There were many opinions who was Mashiach ben Yosef, but that was like the minor one. The major one is the Mashiach ben David that we're all waiting for. Now, it says that Yosef, first of all, it says that he came one day and he was ready to do the Aveira, but he saw suddenly his father's image in the window. And that held him back, and he never ended up doing it with Mrs. Potiphar. Now, and those Meforshim say that really it wasn't the physical image. I mean, the Pashtus is, it was the physical image. But they say that his image came to him every single day, and that's how kept him a Yid, a Tahor v'Kadosh. The only one that has the title Tzaddik is Yosef HaTzaddik. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are called Avram Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech. They all have their titles. But Yosef is called Tzaddik because he carved out and etched into the essence of Klal Yisrael the ability to withstand taiva. And the Gemara says that when a person is nifter, if he didn't learn enough Torah, they ask him, why didn't you learn more Torah? And he says, I was so Torah, I was so poor, I had to work and I didn't have any time. So they're going to question him. What about Hillel, who had such, and he's going to continue to say that he was so poor, and then they're going to bring Rabbi Akiva, who married a woman who was the daughter of a billionaire, but he disowned her because she married Akiva, who was then an Amoritz, and he didn't want anything, and they had to sleep on the straw. And Eliyahu Navi came that there's a woman who desperately needs straw for a mattress that needs, and Rabbi Akiva said to his wife, you see that as poor as we are, that there's still people that are poorer than we are, that they had to come, and it was Eliyahu Navi. And they asked, why didn't he just bring a sack of gold to give to them? But we see that people go through things in life, like we were talking before about the smelling of the caravan, that it be for those few moments or that day or two in a perfect sense of fragrance, that there shouldn't be anything. You see, in Olam Hazeh, we suffer. And people are busy davening, eating kosher, putting on tefillin. We're filled with our days of that. Why are we suffering? But the answer is we don't know the cheshbonis, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as Rabbi Frand used to say, that we get a slap with a wink of the eye. We get a slap with a little kiss to tell us HaKadosh Baruch Hu is worrying about us every single day. And even in the middle of suffering, He is cautious in how it is meted out. Now, with our human minds, it's a very hard concept. Because if you love me, why don't you make me laugh and be happy inside and out all day? But that's the process of Golus. And that's the process of when we lived and we didn't do something which was correct or proper, that we had to come back and we had to correct. And we don't know how that goes, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very careful that if you have to put some type of salve on a child to help with the wound, but the stuff is poison, so very carefully it is applied. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does with us. And that all of the things that we live through and suffer are with that kiss. And that's why there had to be good smelling fragrance in that caravan. And that's why we have to sometimes come to a situation that we have to be able to realize that as bad as it seems to us, there's a kiss there, and that's against human nature. Because who needs the kiss and who wants the bad? But we're not running the world in terms of what we get and what we do and how we think and how we wake up to a new day. So the pasuk says, though, that Vayonas Vayetze Hachutza, 4 times the pasuk says in this story of Yosef with Eshes Potiphar, 4 times the word Hachutza. Now, if it just said Vayonas, he fled, we understand. That means he ran out of the Vayonas. What does fled mean? Why do you have to say Vayetze Hachutza? So twice it says Vayonas Vayetze, and twice it says Vayonas Vayetze Hachutza. So Meforshim explain that we are under the rules and the laws of nature of Olam Hazeh. And that's why, if we're in Olam Hazeh, we go by those rules. When Avram Avinu said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what are you saying to me that I'm going to have this? I'm going to have Eretz Yisrael. I have no children. What do you mean that's going to come from me? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, go outside and take a look at the stars. So we teach the children, look at the stars, that there's so many stars. Ko yi zarecha, so will be your offspring, so will be your children. You're going to have a lot of children, and that's going to be your inheritors. But the Medrash says that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, go out, Hachutza, it meant that he took him out, because Avram Avinu said the correct thing. I was born under this constellation. You can't have children. Hachutza, that he took him out, Hachutza, from that constellation and put him under a different constellation so that he was able to have children. Yosef HaTzadik knew that he had to implant, instill, integrate into the essence of the neshamas of Klal Yisrael, Kedusha and Tahara. And that's why Vayonas Vayetze Hachutza, that he had, and it says in the Gemara that like by Yehuda, he didn't want to do the Aveira with Tamar, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu took the Malach that's Mamuna on Taiva and brought him there to push, physically push Yehuda into doing it with Tamar. Because Mashiach had to come out from that union. So Yosef HaTzadik saw that this was his mission, to be the Amud, the pillar of purity and holiness, Kedusha and Tahara. And that's why Hachutza, he had to be brought out. We could have just said Vayonas. He ran out. He fled. But it says Vayetze Hachutza. He went out of that normal Olam Hazeh, the taiva of that Malach that wanted to push him to do the Aveira, and said, no, I have a bigger mission. And I have to go Hachutza out of this regular temptation and be pulled out to survive without any type of peck, any type of dot of imperfection in this mission of Tahara. And that's why Vayonas Vayetze Hachutza, he pulled himself out from under the influence of that Malach. Now, as I mentioned, that we talk about Tamar. Now, as you know, Tamar married the two sons of Yehuda, and they each died. And the fashion of whatever Yibum was then in those times to be Miyabim. And the first brother died, so the second brother was supposed to marry her, which he did, but he didn't want to have children from her, and he died. Now there was a third brother, Shelah, and Yehuda was afraid that if he gave, and that's the halacha, that he had to give Shelah to Tamar and have children. But Yehuda was afraid that Shelah will marry her and die just like the other two. The other two didn't want her to have children because she was so pretty that they felt that having children will lessen the level of beauty. So they didn't have any children with her. And that's why they died. But Yehuda didn't want Shelah to die. But Tamar knew that from her has to come out Melech HaMashiach. And it's from Yehuda. So if I didn't get pregnant by one of his sons, I have to say, because just think of this, Yehuda was the Tzaddik Hador, the Melech Yisrael. Yehuda. And she put herself out like a harlot, like a woman of ill repute. What did she think? She thought that Yehuda's going to walk by and see a prostitute and he's going to go to her? That's normal thing. How could she have thought that her plan would work? But the Meforshim say that she saw this so clearly that she said, how it's going to happen, I can't question. And many times the Yetzer Hara comes to us. We have a mission and we know it's a right mission. And then suddenly the questions come up. How can you do this? How can you take away from someone a parnasa, even though you know that that's the right thing in that given situation, that you have a psak and you have this, that there's reasons for all of this. That we have to be able to set our sights clear and firm with the goals of what we have to do to be able to survive the mission. I mean, Tamar was was an unbelievable tzaddik, as if the Torah says that if Yehuda didn't admit that it was from him, then she was ready to throw herself, and she knew she had twins. All 3 lives would have been sacrificed because the Torah says she didn't want to embarrass Yehuda. Now, if the Torah said it, that's not like, well, is it true? She really would have allowed herself to be burnt. But if the Torah is myriad, then you know it's 100% true. That she was ready, rather than saying, Yehuda, what are you talking about? Hotzi'uha v'sisarev. You're the one that I was with. And she took the 3 simonim that she was able to prove that it was from him, but she didn't say a word. She didn't say a word. That was the tzidkus. And for her to go and do such a thing, a father-in-law, of course, is also to marry, but it was before Matan Torah. And the format even of the Yibum was not exactly as we do it la'alacha. When you finish learning Masechtas Yevamis and you look into Shulchan Aruch, how do we paskin for this and for that and everything that we do. So the point that Tamar knew that was the end result, she didn't let anything, and she realized that the only way it's going to happen if she presents herself in such a fashion. And because the Torah is made that her kavanah was 100%, and you see what kind of a person she was, that's why she did it. Now, when he was in the house of Potiphar, 3 times, the Yid HaKadosh, who was the Talmud of the Choize of Lublin, asks a question that you see 3 times. It says, Hatzlocha, Hatzlocha, V'chol asher hu oseh, Hashem matzliach biyado. Hatzlocha. And again, the next pasuk, Hatzlocha. And the next pasuk, again Hatzlocha. And then finally, it says, Vayehi me'oz, but on the day, ki hifkid also al kol beiso, that Yosef HaTzadik was put over, and he gave him leadership, that he was to become administrator and manager of all of his possession. Then the pasuk ends and says, Vayevorech oso, HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him. So the Yid HaKadosh asks, why does it say Hatzlocha, Hatzlocha, Hatzlocha? And then it suddenly says an expression of blessing, Vayevorech oso. Says the Yid HaKadosh that Hatzlocha means success, but it only can go to a certain point when you are under the directive of a goy. And you can be matzliach, but there's a limit. But vayehi ki hifkid also, but the day that Potiphar said to Yosef, you know what? You don't have to wait for me for decisions or for what to do. You're on your own. You can do with my possessions. I see you're trustworthy, you're loyal, you're this, you're that. But then came bracha, which is without any limit. And he exceeded and excelled above and beyond, because there was not that umbrella of impurity over him. He was able to thrive in the realm of success above and beyond. Now, Tamar, we say on Sukkot in one of the Hoshanas, Damsa l'Tamar, when we talk about Yerushalayim, and we talk about the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, in that Hakafa which begins Adam, not Adam Meir. One of the hakafas that we go around with says Damsal Tamar, that the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael were Damsal Tamar. They were comparable and similar to a date tree, Tamar, because when there's a hurricane, there are trees that topple right over, but the resiliency of the actual date tree is so strong that to topple it is almost an impossibility, no matter how strong the winds are. And that's what we say, that Damsal Tamar, that the Yidden and Yerushalayim were comparable to a Tamar, resilient, and no matter how much devastation and wars and everything, but with their last drop of blood, they stood fortified and determined to win the battle of where they were placed. But the Bnei Yisachar teaches Damsal Tamar, not comparable to a date tree, but Damsar comparable and compared to Tamar, the lady of Ar Sedra. Damsal Tamar, that Tamar who was ready to throw herself into a fire and stand up for what it means not to embarrass another person, even giving her life and her life of her twins inside her, a way not to cross that line. Damsal Tamar, that Klal Yisrael was ready to be moiser nefesh with every last effort and everything that they possessed and their lives to be able to protect the dignity and the honor of another Yid. And like I mentioned to you before, that the Rambam says that the biggest thing is that when we escort someone, that's the biggest. Why? And the answer is because it enhances the self-worth of a person more than anything else. That means you can feed him, you can give him a comfortable bed with an excellent mattress and a very good quilt, and he has a very good sleep. But that's comfort, and that's kindness. But to say that that is going to uplift the self-respect and the dignity of a human being, but walking out after everything. And as Yaakov Avinu escorted Yosef HaTzadik, and we're going to talk more in Parshas Vayigash about how they talked about Eglah Arufa and why that was so prominent. That was what they were discussing as Yaakov Avinu, it says, walked him out far. He walked him a day's worth of walking. And Yosef was arguing with him. He begged his father, please, Tata, you don't have to come. You don't have to be matriach. You don't have to come out so far. And we'll discuss that in Parshas Vayigash. But the point of the Rambam is the escorting and enhancing the dignity of a person, because there is nothing more, so says the Rambam, that could uplift a person in his own self-image. A lot of people walk around, I'm nothing, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I'm not this. We're busy putting ourselves down so much instead of focusing on the beauty of life, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us and that He cherishes every mitzvah with a hug and a kiss, and that we're so tired and we're so beloved to Him. And yes, we get the patch like we spoke before, but we have to rise above the occasion. So let us hope that in our dealings with other people, that we are able to exert and expend our efforts in the strongest meaningful way with the sincerity of wanting to uplift and make smile and make happy and make another person feel worthy of their existence.